Get settled in, and then I'm going to turn it over to Taylor in just a moment. All right. From what I can see, it looks like everyone was able to get connected to their audio. Thank you all again for joining us today for our April office hours session for our maternal child health, adolescent well-being efforts. Again, we thank you for being willing to be present in this space. I always get a little nervous when I let people know that we're going to record because it's so valuable to have you here and present and engaging around the topics that we bring each week. So we value and appreciate you giving us your time and joining us in this space. I am very excited today to introduce Taylor Seale. She's a positive youth development educator, outreach specialist with UW-Madison Division of Extension in Dane County. She is also a member of our MCH Adolescent Wellbeing Core team and supporting the Patch Youth Wellness Advisory Group efforts and the Youth Engagement, Youth Voice Resource Guide Development, along with Jen Braun, who is also on our call today. Taylor has done tremendous and exciting work. If you were with us last year, you were able to hear and see a little bit about the work Taylor's been doing in Dane County, and we'll likely have an opportunity to peek into that as we go throughout the remainder of this year in our learning community calls as well. But we have heard loud and clear from all of you that there is a desire and a need to learn and understand more about how to engage youth in your spaces, where to start, how to go about that. And there's really no one better to bring to the table today than Taylor. So with that, Taylor, I'm going to turn it over to you, let you take it away, and I'll help monitor the chat and letting people in from the waiting room as well. Thanks for joining us, Taylor.
Thanks, Danette. Wow, I just need you to follow me around and just introduce me to everybody. That was great. Thank you so much. So good morning, everybody. As Danette said, my name is Taylor, and I do a lot of different kinds of youth engagement, both in health spaces, in civic engagement, and community development. So I'm really excited to speak to you today. And also hear more from you about what you're seeing in your own counties, what you're struggling with, what your successes are. So really today, again, we're going to just review what are the youth engagement needs that we've been hearing consistently from our local and tribal health departments. And then we created this quick one-page guide for you that will be available to you. And so we're going to review what the components are of that one-page guide and kind of what the next steps are in terms of the youth engagement fuller guide that we'll create. And I'll get more into that in just a second. So again, why we're here today. So as Danette said, I help coordinate the youth wellness team in collaboration with Patch, Providers and Teens Communicating for Health. And we have a group of 5 amazing high school students who are spread across the state of Wisconsin. We have them in Marathon County, Winnebago County, Racine County, and Dane County. And so basically from the start of the summer and this past year, we've been working on them in terms of learning and engagement around health equity, the social determinants of health, policy systems, and environmental change. And so once we kind of grounded them in that work, they now have been identifying issues within their counties, researching those issues within their counties, and now are in the middle of action planning of what they want to do about these particular issues. And what's really amazing in working with them is, when you ask them, why did you join Patch, or why did you want to be a part of this youth wellness team? They say things like this, right? They say things like, I want to promote change at a state level. I want to provide the state better healthcare. I want to make a tangible difference. And that's really, I think, the foundation of youth engagement is that youth want to make a difference and they want to be able to see the difference that they've made. And so now, when they're in the middle of their action planning, they are looking at their youth risk behavior surveys. They're looking at their chip and chaw reports. And this particular group of youth have identified that they want to do more or address substance misuse and infant mortality within their counties. And I think that those two things are super interesting, and especially super interesting for teens to address. And so when we were kind of going through the action planning, right, it was like, well, what do you want to do about these particular issues? a huge thing was noticing that counties really weren't doing a lot involving youth with these issues in particular. So even if youth had come up with this amazing plan to address substance use, that's the peak of youth engagement, totally youth designed, it falls back on the health departments who are like, well, actually, we want to work with young people, but we don't know how, or we should be working with young people, but we don't. These are all quotes that I've heard in talking with local and tribal health departments, not only within this space, but across the entire state, right? Of things like, it's on our to-do list, but we just haven't had time. We just don't have the capacity. Or we do some work in schools. We gave a presentation, at a morning assembly. Isn't that youth engagement? And so we created, then we're working with the Patch Youth, right? The youth wellness team. And we created this guide, and this is the too long didn't read version, right? So we're going to have a longer version, maybe 4 to 5 pages, that are going to be designed and informed by the youth wellness team. And they're going to be using this as the foundation to really build off of these ideas. And so they're going to really talk about, their own recommendations, their own perceptions around youth engagement, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, what have they seen that's been a really great model, as well as then even narrowing it down further to inform health departments, give them ideas about how can youth support substance misuse and infant mortality efforts in their county. So again, what we're going to do for the majority of the time today is we're just going to kind of go through this guide piece by piece. And Danette is monitoring the chat. So if at any point someone has a question, please put something in the chat. Please unmute. We're happy to walk through. So this first part here, right, this assess, we're going to break it down into kind of 3 components. The first part is assess. And it's really when you're thinking about youth engagement, first think, well, where are you in the program and policy planning framework, right? So for, some examples on things that I've worked on or seen in my own community, a couple years ago, there was a community development project for a new youth art center, and leadership said, we don't have time to survey youth. We can assess them and engage them after the center is built, right? Which doesn't really make any sense. And that's kind of at the end of this wheel, right? Evaluate the program or policy that's already been created, compared to a different community development project that I'm on now for a new teen center in the Fitchburg area, where teens are a part of the planning from start to finish, right? So we're in the assess the community with teens. They're assessing the community alongside city officials, city planners, researchers, and ultimately we'll go through all of these steps in the program and policy planning framework, which ultimately will lead to something better, right, than what the adults could have imagined for youth. And so what's really great, and what we really try to highlight in these reports that go out about this particular community development project, is what youth said they want for the space and what they identify as needs compared to what adults say. And they're very different, and that's extremely important to recognize. And then the second part here of this assess is, once you figure out where you are in the program and policy planning framework, what kind of information do you need from youth, right? A lot of times I think when we think of youth engagement on a particular issue, our mind immediately goes to programming, right? We think, oh gosh, like I don't have the staff or the time to do anything after school for an entire school year, or I don't even know how to run a youth advisory board. The thought of bylaws and Robert's rules, makes my head spin. But I really think that it's important to take a step back and again, assess where you're at in the planning process, because sometimes where you're at in the planning process is not necessarily in your control, right? So really think, what kind of information do you need from youth? Do you just want or need a space to bounce ideas off of them? Do you want them to complete a survey? Sometimes our youth engagement is only once, or maybe it's once a week for an entire school year, or maybe it's a quarterly meeting, or maybe it's just for 4 Friday evenings in the summer. But again, no matter how big or small the ask is, youth just want to be involved. And so then this leads to this last part of this first step. Is the engagement meaningful? So even if you just want to talk to youth once to bounce ideas off of them and get their opinion, maybe that's all you have capacity for. That's great. But is it meaningful? As in, do youth understand why you're there? Do they know what the issue is? Do they understand how their voice will help evaluate or change or be a part of the implementation process for a program or policy? Do you follow up with them so they can see the impact of their opinions? Youth, at the end of the day, want to say, I made a tangible difference. And so there's been many times where I've had, say, focus groups with youth, and maybe I only have one focus group with one particular group of youth. But then afterwards, I'm making sure that I'm sending them an email saying like, hey, remember we did that focus group? Here's this report. You can see how, this report went to county board officials, it went to city council, it went to the school board leaders, and youth, that's meaningful. They get to see then that the work that they did, even if it was just once, is impactful and meaningful, and they get to see the tangible difference that their voice made. And so again, when we think of meaningful engagement, a way to kind of check ourselves, right? To see if our engagement is meaningful. And again, engagement meaning small or large points of contact is what we call Hart's ladder of participation. And so we'll start at the bottom here, all the way from declaration or manipulation, all the way to the top, which is where we really want to be, youth initiated and shared decision making. So again, the top of the ladder is where we want to be, but we also know that sometimes that just isn't possible depending on our capacity. So again, we try to stay as much as we can in the green section of the ladder and try to be and aim for being as high up on the ladder as we can. So I'm just going to quickly walk through these. So if a particular type of engagement falls under declaration or manipulation, that means that youth are asked about a particular issue, but they don't know how their ideas will be used, as well as they can't verbalize the project or issue, right? So we might see this, if there's a conference, say on, I know that there was like some after school programming conference, and it was filled with teachers and educators and public health officials. And if you just have a youth choir that comes in and does a performance and say like, yay, thanks youth, and they leave, that's declaration and manipulation, right? Like they're not a part of the conference. They're not informing how their school or built environment can, change their health or accelerate their academic learning. They're just there, and the adults can say, oh, look, we have kids here. Okay, bye. And they leave. And they don't say what the conference is about. The next rung up is called tokenism, where youth are asked about a particular issue, but they have little to no choice in how they can express their opinions. So oftentimes we see this, if people come in and say, hey, what do you think about this? And already internally, we know that 98% of the decisions have already been made, and they're just coming to talk to youth at the end of the process, and it really doesn't influence decision making at all. Next to the next rung, right, we're starting to get into the green section now of the ladder, assigned and informed. So youth understand what a particular issue is, and they understand that their opinions are respected, but ultimately, right, decisions are made by adults, which is different than the next rung up, which is consulted and informed, which is just a slightly different in that youth opinions are taken seriously, right? Really taken into serious consideration. But again, ultimately decisions are made by adults. Then the next ladder up is adult initiated shared decision making. So perhaps the program or idea or policy is designed by adults, or perhaps it's adults saying, hey, I think we have this idea, let's get youth involved. But then youth are involved in the implementation and decision making, right? So adult idea first, but then youth are brought in later, and there's still a shared decision making process. And then again, at this top part of the ladder, which is really where we want to see youth are leading the ideas, right? Youth come up with an idea, or they have, a particular issue that they want to address. They, are then working alongside adults in shared decision-making processes to make the project happen. So we are going to do a little bit of a quiz. No, not really. But really, we're just going to see where you think this example falls on the ladder. So I believe, and Danette or Zoe, if do people have the button annotate on there? So if you have annotate, you can then like put a little stamp, or you can put a little circle on the ladder of where you think this is. And if that doesn't work, you can simply just put it in the chat as well. So where do you think that this example falls on the ladder? You have a group of high school summer interns who are supporting you in a local task force that addresses healthy eating. They're extremely passionate about food security. So when grant funding comes in to support healthy eating, you ask the interns how they think some of the funds can be used. Ultimately, you don't go with their recommendations due to the capacity and budget constraints, but you appreciate their support and thoughts and are holding on to their, opinions and ideas for perhaps a later grant. Okay, so where do you think that this youth engagement falls on the ladder? And you can just put a little stamp by which rung you think it is, or you can put it in the chat.
Anyone wants to go ahead and find annotate if they haven't. At the top of your screen, I believe is where you'll find it now. You'll see view options with a drop down. If you open that drop down, you'll be able to click on annotate, and then you will be able to either draw, or you can click the check mark, which is a stamp. There we go. We've got some movement on there. Fantastic.
Nice. Great. Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Also in the chat, Taylor, we had an assigned and informed, a vote for that rung, which seems to be winning the race right now.
All right, just a few more moments. Okay, great. So yeah, so for those who had put consulted and informed, that is where this fits, right? Where youth opinions are taken seriously, where it's not just like, tell us what you think. They they're a part of this task force. They are then told, hey, we have this grant funding, let's take a look at it, which means like they're probably, in looking at it in depth with whoever their adult supervisor is. And their opinions are taken seriously, right? So this ask isn't just a, oh, just let us know what you think, and we'll just like see what happens. But they really want to know what will be used, or what youth are thinking. And then also, ultimately the decision is still made by adults, right? So this group of high school students would be able to say, what task force they're in, what they're doing, what this grant funding does. And so again, the more that we can, have youth verbalize and understand the work that they're doing and the impact that they have is great. Okay, thanks for that. Okay.
Taylor, I'm gonna interrupt, and I apologize. We have a question in the chat that I think is good before we move on. What is the key difference between assigned and informed and consulted and informed?
That's a great question. And I will just go back to, this ladder here with the definitions. Is there a way to clear the annotations? Clear all drawings. Oh, there we go. I figured it out. Okay. So yeah, so I think the difference is the opinions are taken seriously versus like opinions are just like, thanks for that. That's nice, respected. And those are very like, at the end of the day, those are very similar things. But I think it's like the consulted and informed is like, hey, you're a part of this and you're ingrained in the work. Perhaps a difference would be like, maybe if it wasn't a group of high school students who weren't a part of the task force, right? Who, weren't in the, in the meetings, didn't know about the grant funding, and they were just perhaps said, hey, what do you think about how we can address food security or healthy eating in your community? And they give some ideas and opinions, but they don't necessarily have the ins and outs of what's going on internally. So that would be assigned and informed, like, hey, we need you to do this. Thank you for your input. And then we're going to move on. Versus consulted and informed, it's like, okay, this is, the feedback that you give or opinions that you give could be implemented, right? But, especially because they're in that task force, then they have a little bit more power to be able to leverage that. But at the end of the day, the decision is still made by the adults. I hope that helps. Okay, let me go back to another, let's do the same thing. This is another example. Your marketing team created posters aimed at addressing youth mental health stigma. Your team narrows it down to 2 poster designs, but no one on your team can decide which campaign to go with. So you decide to ask a group of middle school students during their health class what their preference is. So where do you think this engagement falls under the Heart's ladder of participation? So again, same thing, you can put stuff in the chat or you can put on your annotated. All right, just a few more moments. Great, okay. So for those who had put tokenism, that is correct, right? And when we think of tokenism, when we go back to that definition, right, it's that youth are asked their opinions, but there's no way in which they can decide and how their voice will be used. So when you kind of take a step back and think about this, right, instead of the marketing team, involving youth in the beginning, right, to think like, how can we work with youth and they know how we can address mental health stigma, they've narrowed it down to two options. So there's no option to say like, youth could say, actually, we don't like any of these poster designs, let's go back to the drawing board. They're saying, here are your two options, pick one. That's not meaningful youth engagement, right? As opposed to working with youth, to co-design, co-develop something. And this is something not specifically with youth mental health, but again, with another organization that I was working with, where they were coming down with two logo designs and they couldn't decide which. It was a group of adults sitting in a room, who couldn't decide. And this, the logo for this new space or this new organization was going to be, the visual for this new organization, this new era. And so they had worked with a design team, a consulting team, and they couldn't decide between two. So then they were like, let's talk to kids and have them decide. And kids actually vocalized that they didn't like either design. That was very clear, where they were like, both of these logos don't make sense to us. We don't think it fits what this space is trying to do. Can we put together a group of youth who can work with the designers and like come up with this, youth created logo? And the answer was a resounding no. Nope, we only have the capacity and the funding. We've already paid for this design firm. We don't have time. You can only pick these two. So unfortunately, and why this is also tokenism, right? Because youth can't really vocalize, they can't change the outcome, right? They're just being asked their opinion and there's no way for them to actually influence or change the decision making. And then also this organization said, oh, we talked to youth. We got youth input about these two logos, when in reality, it was tokenism. Okay, we're gonna do one more. I'm gonna clear these. Okay. Now, this last one, where do you think this example falls on the ladder? So youth see in their school and have read their county's YRBS survey that the use of e-cigarettes among their peers has significantly increased. A group of middle schoolers asked their principal if they can be members on the school board to inform policy around this issue. Where do you think this falls on the engagement ladder? All right. Yeah, everyone got this one, right? This is youth initiated shared decision making, right? And that's really what we want to aim to be, as much as we can, right? So knowing too that sometimes it's not possible, sometimes depending on our capacity, depending on our budgets, right, it might not be possible. But when we think about framing our engagement on the green parts of this ladder, it can be more meaningful overall. So then that's the first part, right? Assess. Where are you in the, in the program planning? Where are you, in terms of what you need from youth? And is your engagement meaningful? And then we're going to move forward to this next part here, which is connect. So, it's important to value and understand that schools are great partners and collaborators, as well as they are just as strapped for time and capacity as us, right? So I have colleagues at health departments who are like, we just can't get kids interested. I've cold called the school reception so many times. I don't understand. We're just not getting any responses. And what's important here is to really understand that it takes time to build relationships with schools. And particularly, it's important for you to know who the school principal is and who the counselors and social workers are. I will often, and what I've had great success with, is sending youth opportunities to the principal, counselors, and social workers, explain what the opportunity is, and ask them to identify youth who they think would benefit from being involved. So then a student is much more likely to apply or get involved because their trusted adult at school encouraged them to be a part of the engagement. And again, really working with these individuals at schools to collaborate, right? How can we build on existing efforts and youth efforts, right? Is there a school or youth club that's already doing similar work? Can we build on it as opposed to creating something new? And additionally, too, is it in your budget to offer incentives for youth to participate, right? And sometimes it is in our budget to provide stipends. I've had so much success in even just offering, if it's say it's a focus group and it's just a one-time deal, I will, ask a group of kids, it could be, in an after school setting or a community center setting, to say, hey, can I talk to you about, can we do a focus group real quick, and talk about mental health? And oftentimes kids will say, no, not interested. And then I will hold up a $5 bill and say, would you like to talk to me now? And they say, yes, I would. And students will come and talk to me for hours about a particular issue simply because I gave them $5, right? And if you don't have it in your budget, right? If you're just like, we don't have it in the budget to provide stipends, are there other creative ways that you can offer incentives, right? Can you work with the school district to provide students class credit, right? Even a quarter or a half credit that goes on their resume to show that they did some kind of civic engagement, or it could be an internship. Or can you say the hours that they work with you count as volunteer hours? That can also go on their resume, right? So you can work with schools and work with youth individually to see what will make them want to participate in a particular activity. And then I also put here, of course, we're going to do, ask your local UW Extension office for help, right? So on the guide as well, we have our entire map of the state of Wisconsin, and we have educators, and we have we have extension staff in every single county. And so that's often where I will start. If I'm working in a new community or a new county or a new group and I'm unfamiliar, I will reach out to my extension educator and say, hey, do you have contacts at this health department, or who do you know at the school who's doing after school programming? And they, more often than not, will have someone that I would never have thought to call, or I had the wrong email or the wrong name, and they're like, oh, you need to talk to this person. And then they have that connection as well. So that makes it easier for you to make that connection. Sorry, I'm just trying to advance my slide here. Oh, I'm still on annotate, that's why. Okay. And this last page here, or this last section here, right? So the first being assess, second being connect, and the third being innovate. As adults, we have our own biases against youth, right? If you have kids of your own, nieces, nephews, etc., you have your own immediate opinions about, quote unquote, how kids are. I've had many adults say, it's not worth talking to teens. I can't even get my own teen to say one sentence to me, let alone, inform a whole health policy. And I think what's really harmful about this kind of approach is that when we think of engaging youth and we immediately think of our own kids, we immediately shift the power dynamic, right? As in, we are the adult, we know what's best. And when in reality, we want to engage youth and see them and value them as co-researchers, co-designers, co-collaborators. So again, and this is a quote from our youth wellness team member. It's a common misconception that young people aren't interested in advocacy, or they aren't interested in putting forth effort to create change. And that's 100% true, right? Again, we have our own biases when it comes to working with youth. And so these last 2 points here is, again, just recognizing youth are researchers. They are change makers. They want to be seen and heard. they will come up with ideas and solutions that you didn't even think of. And as well as, from a public health perspective and a positive youth development perspective, engaging youth in these meaningful engagement activities is good for their health, right? It is healthy for them physically and mentally to be able to contribute to their built environments. And then also on a long scale, they are improving their community and therefore yours by informing the work to have better programs and policies. So again, you know, we will, as part of this technical assistance, right, you will have this one pager, right, this too long didn't read version, you know, that you can print and put up on your desk. And as you are thinking of like, oh yeah, I want to engage young people, but I don't know how, start here, right? Go through these steps, you know, reach out to your local extension office as well. And then we will be working, and what the youth wellness team will actually be presenting in June is we're working on then a little bit of a longer guide, not too long, because I mean, I've been on that where I've been given like a 20-page PDF, not going to read it, right? We're going to try to make it, you know, 3 to 5 pages, diving into what you see on this one page in just a little bit more detail, right? Providing some concrete examples, you know, giving some ideas, and youth in particular will be giving their opinions and thoughts on what does meaningful youth engagement look like to them, as well as, you know, showing their research skills and their dissemination skills of how youth can support substance misuse and infant mortality efforts in their counties. So before we end with any questions or next steps, you know, please feel free to unmute or put in the chat, you know, what questions do you have about this too long didn't read version, this one pager, or this guide, right? What do you want to see in this guide? What will be helpful to you? So again, you can put stuff in the chat. You can say, you know, you can unmute, you can say what was helpful, what was not helpful, because this guide that we create, this 3 to 5 page guide, is for you to use, is for you to be able to pick up and say like, cool, I know exactly what I can do. Here are some tangible steps and ideas. So we'll just have a few moments to let people have any questions, any comments, things that they would like to see in this longer 4 to 5 page guide that will be created later by our youth. And if there aren't any questions, that's okay. We will, you know, send out the guide as this one pager, and you know, if you're like me, I'm like, I need to take a moment and I'll look at it later and provide some feedback or provide my thoughts. That's also okay. All right, now moving forward. So Danette, is there anything else you would like before we do these last 2 slides? Is there anything else you would like to review or go over before we wrap up? Oh, thanks, Laura. I see that as I love the graphics. That's super helpful. Didn't that frozen? Is that just me? Okay, so sorry, I think we're having some technical difficulties here, but thank you everyone again. You know, we will be sending out, oh, Nick, thank you. You'll be sharing this with your CHA steering committee. Yeah, that's amazing. And again, you know, Nick, and that's why we're here as the technical assistance team, right? We've done quite a lot of work, or many of us have, in working with youth directly about how they can both help design the survey and then also give recommendations of how the administration of that survey goes out, as well as the dissemination, right? So again, when we're thinking of that youth engagement, right, maybe it is just you need youth to take this community health survey, but then youth also want to know, what is this for? How will it inform, policy or programs in my neighborhood? How will my voice or my words contribute to this? And so the more that you can, give those touch points, and allow youth to be, okay, yeah, Danette, okay, cool. I wasn't sure if it was me but Danette, yes, seems to be frozen. So again, Nick, if you and any others who are, right, like working on a developing a health survey, right? Thinking back to that program planning wheel, right? Where are you? If you're at the assess the community, how can youth be a part of that assessing the community? I think we go in often being like, here's the survey, let's let youth, fill it out, and we're going to get the information that we need. And sometimes even the way that we design a survey, youth will say like, I don't know what this is for, so I'm not going to complete it, right? But the more you can give them ownership, the more that you can, inform them, the more that they can verbalize what this is for and how their words will be used, the more participation you're going to get. So that's great that you, are going to be involving, want youth engagement in some point with your CHA steering committee, Nick. That's great. So as Danette put in the chat, yeah, Nick, great. Would love to have you being on the steering committee. Absolutely, right? And even if it's, one or two youth, right, who are there, who are informing it, right? Like, really just thinking of like, are there opportunities for youth to be a part of the entire program planning wheel, or the public health framework wheel? Can we get them in from the beginning so then youth can be a part of the whole process from start to finish? And, sometimes I feel like that we think that that's going to be this like heavy lift, but it really doesn't have to be. And then at the end of the day, right, when you have this, I think, Nick, what you'll see is, having youth on your steering committee, or having youth be meaningfully engaged about developing the community health survey, I think you will then have the responses that will be different or surprising or really rich in terms of what youth want to say about their communities, simply because they were given the opportunity to be involved. All right, so that is all I have. Danette has put in the chat the evaluation survey. We also, again, we are here as, consultants, collaborators. We're here to bounce ideas off of each other, right? So if you have any questions, any suggestions, please let us know how today went. Please let us know what else we can be doing to inform your work and support your work. And again, this one pager will be available to you, as well as we will have kind of a more formalized 3 to 5 page guide that will dive into those details just a little bit more. But again, you'll have that one pager. So if you're truly feeling stuck and don't even know where to start, you can start with that. So thank you so much, everybody. Danette or Debbie, is there anything else that we need before we end for the day?
No, thank you, Taylor.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Our core team will stay on. So myself, I will also stay on. If you do have any specific questions about the one pager or anything else that we talked about today, and you want to hop in or talk on in more depth, please do so. We'll stay on for a few more minutes and happy to chat through. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks so much for your engagement today and for your comments and questions and feedback. I appreciate it. And we will see you soon.